Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome to the Nico Show. Yes, it's not the Earthlings 2.0 podcast right now. It is a celebration of Nico Johnson and the 800 episodes that SunCast has produced over the years. So I'm pretty thrilled to have the opportunity to introduce you to your very own Nico Johnson. Nico, congratulations.
It is so awesome to get a chance to share the stage with you again. I love when we get a chance to just sort of chop it up. I think that you are one of the folks that I look to most often when I am asking questions around sort of not just what people would expect, industry PR and the questions around marketing, but for those who aren't unaware and aren't listening to Earthlings on a regular basis, which they should, you have a great radio pedigree, and you often give excellent advice on that has helped me organize myself better. So thank you for agreeing to co-host along with Julia an 800th episode here for SunCast.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. Thank you for inviting us to be a part of the Resource Labs Network and your family over here. It sounds like you need a little bracelet that's just like, what would Lisa Ann do?
I
do.
Do
We need to make those up?
That's awesome, actually. I think Jeremy would want that bracelet too. That's so fun. Probably it would become a crutch, and your whole team would wear one, and then you'd regret making that recommendation.
Oh, I've already trained them to try and think like me. That was something that I learned early on at NPR. I had an editor who, he wasn't the friendliest, and I don't necessarily think he liked his job, but he was just like, look, you just need to think like me, okay?
Yeah.
I can't be editing everything you've got going on here. You need to think like me so that when I get this, it's easier for me to edit. And I was like,
amazing.
Oh, okay. I was this 20-year-old, reporter. I'm like, okay.
I wish I had, I really wish I had some NPR stories, honestly. That's one of the things that's one of the many that I admire about you is the work that you did at NPR and how not only is it so divergent from what you do now, but how it informs just the way that you show up as a professional. Like you're really polished from a media perspective. You're very organized behind the scenes. Yeah, so I am now thinking, what would Lisa Ann do on a frequent basis? You've sort of gotten that in my brain around run of show and stuff and such. Yeah. For those who are unfamiliar with the ongoing inside joke here, Lisa Ann is my co-host for the Power Up Live morning show in what will be now Las Vegas, but at the RE Plus annual show. If you haven't enjoyed that, you should come to the morning show. Lisa Ann also gave us the wonderful idea of having a Bloody Mary bar, which will likely
that was a big hit.
Rebuff this year. Yeah, that was great. Is rebuff the right word? Saved my life
once.
Yeah, totally. I needed that spicy tomato surprise there on Wednesday and Thursday mornings. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. Well, let's get into it because I don't want to take up much more of your time.
Oh, I mean, my time is yours. So
thank you.
Yeah, it helps to be a little bit of a perfectionist, a little OCD, and have like a theater and production background. That helps me help
Indeed.
you. So I'm happy to do that. Okay, so here are my questions. I have a bunch, but we'll probably only get through a few. My first question is, obviously you started the podcast because you expected to get something out of it, okay? For you personally, or to have a specific experience, right? That's why you started it. And whenever we embark on these large projects with our lives, there are things that come about that we didn't expect, but that were ultimately incredibly beneficial. And had we not gone down that path, we would have never had that experience or that realization or that learning. So that's my first question for you. What have you gotten out of being the host of the SunCast podcast for 800 episodes that you didn't expect?
I can honestly say that I didn't expect well, first of all, I started the podcast so I could become friends with people like you, and that I would have the hope of someday being able to have Jigger Shaw on speed dial, and
mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. And I've been pretty open with folks that early days, while it seemed like a passion project, it was a really selfish opportunity for me to establish a personal brand. And I knew that podcast was genuinely, and it remains so, a great platform where folks who would otherwise not necessarily pick up the phone or jump on a Zoom call just to have me ask them questions, but because we are all geared towards self-promotion, if I said, hey, I'm going to share you with my 20 plus thousand LinkedIn audience, they would gladly hop on the phone. The thing that I really have been taken aback by is the number of people who have, through the years, shared how SunCast has helped them, has changed their lives. And I think of a particular guy, Spencer, who early on reached out and said that because of an episode of SunCast, he had gotten hired at a company. He's now like on, I think, iteration 3 of his career in the solar industry, and continues to sort of level up in influence and reach and acumen. And he was transitioning into this industry and counted SunCast as a catalyst, a crux for his career move. And he is among hundreds now who have reached out and said such. And that I never intended for the podcast to be a career podcast or a catalyst in any way to help folks that were transitioning into the industry. I said from the very beginning, I want to pull back the veil on how this industry works. It was not readily apparent to me that I was going to be talking to mid-career folks that were genuinely interested in finding the right cultural fit. And I think that ties into point number 2, the one that actually gets me a little bit more emotional, is that I did not expect how vulnerable people would be willing to be. And it's remarkable how quickly through this medium, if you approach it right, you can build rapport. And how that authentic connection can lead to people sharing. I can't tell you how many times people have said, I've never told anybody this, as a predicate for an answer to a question on the show. And the real proof of that is in the number of guests who've reached out afterwards and said, hey, I know that you published this. Is it okay if I ask for a copy, like an MP3 copy, like it's a photograph, right? Like, can you sit? And I'm like, and I'll say, look, we don't share it because we don't want people to put it on their website. And they would say, I'm explicitly not looking to post it anywhere. I want to save it in our family Dropbox so my kids can listen to it someday.
Aww. Wow. That's a testament to how comfortable and safe people feel with you as an interviewer, and how authentic you are when you show up to interview them. Yeah. And of course, this whole medium of audio, and now we also do, obviously we all do YouTube as well, but the primary way people take in this information is from an auditory perspective, and it's a very intimate experience.
Yeah. Thankfully, people don't watch us cry as often as they could have.
It's just I thank you for that. It really shows how much your heart is in this work. And I want to thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. That kind of leads me to my next question, though. You're talking about folks moving into this industry and listening to your show to get that information. Now, if you could time travel back in time to your very first episode, what advice would you give young Nico Johnson? He has a little bit more hair, probably.
He does, a little bit more. He has a bigger beard. You remember that? He had a massive beard. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. What advice would you give Nico Johnson, episode 1?
Well, I know what advice others would give me. It would be, when you get to episode 100, don't change the frickin' music, Nico. It's awesome, and we love it. So if you haven't listened to any of the first 100 episodes, the theme music was epic. It was epic. But it tied to the Solar Warrior theme, and I felt like we evolved a little bit beyond like the battle cry type advice. I was very unsure of myself. I was very unclear what I wanted from this medium. And it's evident if you listen to episode 1. Episode 1, we called it the Latin America Solar Podcast, which is, by the way, ripping off almost in its entirety Adam James, dear friend, who was guest one, Latin America Solar Report at Green Tech
Mm.
Media at the time, because I was just being unoriginal. I knew I wanted to share sort of insights from the front lines of the companies that were out building solar in the fastest growing solar market in the world, Latin America. But I just didn't take enough time to think through how I wanted to show up. And I would tell Nico in the summer of 2015, as he was thinking through it and planning it, get clear about who you want to be. Get clear about your voice. What are you going to talk to this community about? What are you going to build community around? Don't piggyback other people's ideas. That's not in and of itself a bad thing, by the way. There's lots of people who make a name for themselves like me by giving other people a platform and sharing other people's ideas. I think that the thing I've seen most often right now, especially as people sort of struggle with how they want to show up in social media for the last decade, is that folks just don't take enough time to reflect on what is my authentic voice? What is it that I can speak confidently about? And if you look back over the canon of SunCast, it's evidence in the number of solo episodes I've done. I could count them on two hands.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's a critique to his credit of Jigger when we talk is he says, Nico, you got a lot of experience. You're 45 years old. You're considered an industry veteran and thought leader, but what do you lead from a thought perspective? Like, where do your thoughts lead people? I think that that's what I would want to encourage 36-year-old Nico to think about is, where do your thoughts lead people?
I like that because we're all leaders in our own way. And oftentimes we don't even know who's watching us
Yeah,
and who sees us as mentors, but they may never indicate that to us at all.
that's right.
And so it's important to take a step back and think about, well, how do I want to be leading folks? What's my message? What do I stand for? And, but it's at the same time, you can get sort of stuck in analysis paralysis
That's
with
right.
that.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just got to get going. Just make the first episode, get a couple under your belt, and you figure out from that experience what you want to talk about and how you want to shape it. And that's very common for podcasts. I mean, at NPR, we weren't allowed to even go on the air with a new show until we had workshopped it 3 months with actual interviews.
I believe it.
Doing the whole thing like it was real, because we did discover our voice through that experience.
I'm so glad that you gave that counterpoint, by the way. And congratulations on episode 100.
Oh, thank you.
Because I say to folks all the time who ask me, should I start a podcast? And my answer is never should you start a podcast. It is, I always will say two things. I'll say, how many podcasts have you been a guest on? Because that's where you should start. And then second, once you start, are you committed to 100 episodes? Because that's how long it's going to take. I know a lot of podcasters. I know a lot of very successful millionaire podcasters. I got lucky and was mentored by many of them. I'm sad to say I'm not one of them, but
not yet. Not yet.
But I've spent a lot of time with podcasters who will consistently tell you, like, I have two mentors who've both done over 5,000 episodes. Actually, three mentors who've done over 5,000 episodes. So 800, they're like, that's nice, Nico. Good job. Keep going. And honestly, to your question, I don't know if, like, Nico starting episode 1 was gung-ho. He was ready to go. And then he hit episode 9, and we call it pod fading, right? I lost my job at Conergy, which I rarely talk about, like some deep trauma there that took me a long time to overcome. And for almost a year, I didn't publish an episode. He just sat there at episode 9. Maybe I published one in between. And then I did an interview with a friend, Harry, at Podcast Junkies, and he kicked me in the butt and said, you got to get back on the horse. And so if there's advice that I would give anyone who's thinking about content creation writ large, not just podcasts,
that's just a medium.
Yeah. Consistency is key. And the thing that I regret most about the podcasts, second only to not starting videos sooner, is that I took almost a year off at a critical time in my career and in the industry where that year I'd be at 1,000 episodes by now. And I'm very certain that there would have been some really interesting changes. I'll share. I've never shared this from the show. Around that time, after episode 8 or 9, Stephen Lacey and Scott Clavina and the Green Tech Media team, they asked me to a meeting. It was at Solar Power Mexico, the first ever RE Plus Mexico show. Oh no, it was actually, I think maybe even Green Tech Media was putting it on, like co-hosting it with them. Anyway, they were all down in Mexico, and Stephen, in a very flattering way, said, "You're doing a great job. What would it look like to be a part of Green Tech Media, like a part of what we're trying to do?" We didn't exactly come to terms on what it would look like, but I actually think that if I had kept going, that conversation would have kept going. And me taking 6 to 7 months off, because I was just trying to figure out what does my career look like. I just got laid off from Conergy. I took a new job, which was great. Moved my family to Durham. Like, it was a lot of change. That opportunity, I'll say, stalled and never really surfaced again. And that, I think we all can agree, would have changed the course of SunCast, right? So I'm really grateful for people like Steven and Jigger and you, Kristen Kirsch at Next Tracker, folks who have been very kind with their time and given advice when it was needed, given interviews, and given entree to their audience and platform as the moment availed itself. And I just hope for everyone that as you stay consistent, you get as lucky as I have, because I had great timing and I was consistent when it mattered. When I really kicked back in, I haven't stopped since then. But yeah, that Nico needed to know that, like, it really, consistency is key, and taking 3 to 6 months off can kill the momentum.
Yeah. When there might have been a little bit of imposter syndrome there, if you were trying to figure out things,
a wee bit,
just got laid off. So, like, who am I even to be talking about this stuff? Like,
totally.
There could have been all kinds of subconscious thoughts in your mind that led to that time off, and it is what it is. That's the path.
Regret yeah. What is it they say? Regret for wasted time is more wasted time.
Yeah. I guess I've never heard that one, so I'm gonna write that down. But we live in a multiverse, so you can feel comforted knowing that there is a Nico Johnson out there that didn't quit, and is on a different
crushing
path.
It. He's at 8,000 episodes. He's running a $1 billion media company somewhere.
Yeah, but he could have other problems, So
he would have other problems. I can tell you.
It's not all green.
There's a multiverse where Nico is a platinum, album selling, Grammy awarded, Christian rock musician.
Yeah.
and that was an alternate universe that I got in the little vehicle that shifts universes and brought me back to this one. Yeah, that could have been the alternate Nico as well.
Yeah, I have an alternate Lisa Ann that's an executive at a big, film studio in Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
And probably, empty on the inside because she sold her soul out to the entertainment industry. But that's a totally different show.
Dude, our paths cross in so many ways.
I know. I want to ask you though, this idea around the multiverse. So obviously there's Nicos out there that have podcasts, and they may not all be on this topic. So what would be a completely different topic that Nico Johnson, Universe 385 is focused on?
I'll tell you, the person whose podcast I envy, I don't know if it's the most, but I look at it and I'm like, that is such a unique way to make money, is the guy that does the Sleep With Me podcast. Like, he talks people to sleep, and it's not a bad thing. He's like a multimillionaire.
Wow.
One of the top grossing podcasts of all time.
That just tells you how difficult people have with sleep these days.
I know.
Wow.
And, people have said to me, oh, you have a voice, natural voice for podcasts. You're very calming, etc. And I've thought about that. I'm like, man, I should be like, maybe there's a different type of podcast that I should be doing. So I originally was going to start a kite surfing podcast. And any of my close friends know that I have two extreme sports. I wonder actually if you know, because we've talked about it at least once, but I wonder if what I think is true is true. Do you know what my two sports are?
No, please
No,
tell
not at
me.
all. Don't even wager a guess.
I I would not have guessed kite surfing, so obviously I didn't know that one.
Okay.
Um, I kind of do feel like you've told me this, but it's
Are we
not coming
even
to my
friends
mind.
at all? Are we even friends at all?
I
Um,
don't think so.
I
It's. I mean, we probably should just end it here.
I
It's
know.
just
Gosh, I
such a
should have done this
disappointment.
litmus test before I asked you to host. Uh, um, all right. So I don't like shout it from the rooftops, but I'm in like WhatsApp groups for this stuff. I love kite surfing and I also love rock climbing.
I was gonna
And
say rock climbing, but then my brain
yeah,
said no. That's too obvious.
so Kai, the CEO of Pegasus, and I share this in common. And also David Peñalba at Helio Volta and I are both avid rock climbers. There's a lot of rock climbers and kite surfers. Karen, my business partner, is a kite surfer. Anyway, I at the time, so now it's pickleball, but at the time, kite surfing was the fastest growing sport in the world, and solar was the fastest growing sort of business in the world. And so I was torn between the two, and I thought, well, I know an awful lot about solar, and so that's an easy one to fall on, and because I can keep the content going. But I had this other multiverse idea where I started, and there was not, by the way, I don't even know if there is right now, but there wasn't a kite surfing podcast, and it's so obvious to me now in hindsight that actually was a really good idea that would have done really well. But I would have had to basically dedicate all of my travel, which my wife didn't want to do, to going to these kite competitions and getting to know. It turns out in retrospect, this would have been easier than I thought it was. But I would have had to get to know all the manufacturers. So I live in North Carolina. Out in Outer Banks lives one of the most famous kite designers. And he's got a super popular YouTube channel. So the sport, by the nature of the way it works and like having to visually see it, actually blew up more on YouTube. And I didn't see that coming. And so in retrospect, I'm really glad I didn't go that direction, because it's the kind of thing that like a YouTube channel is way, way, way more palatable. But I ended up, when we lived down in Mexico, getting to know a guy named Foca. Foca runs a really cool kite school. It's the longest running continuously running kite surfing school in Mexico, down in Isla Blanca. And he's connected to everyone in the industry because he's been around forever, and people go down to Mexico to kite on vacation. You can tell, like, I still sort of look back and think, wish I had started that kite surfing podcast, because it's also just a way to not have this, what I thought would be a hobby, be so tied to what I do for a living. But then, 2019, I decided to do this for a living and not have like a solar industry consulting gig, but rather build a media company around telling people stories.
And you know what they say? There's that one phrase, "Oh, do something you love. You never work a day in your life." But then the inverse of that is turn your hobby into your job, and you'll be fucking miserable at the thing that used to bring
That's
you so
right.
much joy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's got to be a fun rhyme to that. Turn your hobby into your jobby, and I don't know. And then you'll start to sound like Dobby. I don't know. Oh my god! I would feel like a house elf to the kite surfing industry.
Because the reason we always get into this work is because we love something about it, right?
Yeah.
But typically, when you turn it into a business, then you end up hiring other people to do the thing that you love about the work, and then you end up running the business, and that's not necessarily why you got into it. So it is this struggle that business owners generally have writ large across any industry. And, that sort of leads, actually, that's a great segue. Good job, Lisa Ann. That's a great segue into my next question.
You're a wonderful host. I love it. You just find those segues so naturally.
And so it's like, everybody has this experience where they just want to quit because it's not what they signed up for.
Oh, yeah.
But by the time you realize that you want to give it up because it's not what you signed up for, you've built this entire apparatus and you're supporting other people and you've got a reputation and there's all this, the whole machine is moving, right? So 800 episodes, obviously you had those thoughts even after episode 9, right? After you got back into it.
Yeah.
I gotta assume because that's a
Even
lot of
after episode
episodes.
709.
Yeah, so what was there a moment where you questioned whether you
Multiple.
wanted to continue Suncast, and what pulled you through?
Multiple moments. I have almost quit this company and this idea half a dozen times. Um, I'll tell you, I feel like turning it into a business was the actual hardest part. Um, People don't appreciate how hard it is to make money from this medium. And I do, man, there are still days, Lisa Ann, you know what this feels like because you've had these interviews. There are still days where I do an interview and it just lights me up. And I'll
Yeah.
walk out of my office and my wife will see it on my face and she knows what's coming. She knows I'm going to be like, I just killed that one. That was the best interview ever. And I'll be on cloud nine. Like I remember so well, like a handful of those interviews that just comes immediately to mind where I was just like, this is what I was born to do. And it's hard to anchor that feeling, but you have to do that. Like I learned at a like adult sleepawake summer camp hosted by a guy named Jonathan Fields, Camp Good Life Project. God, it really did help me a lot. Just realign with what I was doing this for. That, you know, it was like it was a conference, but shrouded in this like go have fun with other adults who are on the same path of trying to figure out who they are. I learned how to anchor gratitude. And I remember sitting, I wish I could walk you listening to this through it. It would take longer than we have, but I remember sitting in a session with Light Watkins. You can look Light up. He's written tons of books on meditating. And he walked us through this, like how to actually identify what gratitude feels like, you know, and like feel it in your body. And that moment was a moment that allowed me to anchor to these, I'll call them happy moments, right? Moments that I look back and say, I'm really glad that I got a chance to experience that. And if I only get one of those a year, I'll keep going. Another one of those, I was gifted UPW, Unleash the Power Within, by one of my coaching clients. Thank you, Clayton. And Tony Robbins, for all the flack that he gets, he's really changed a lot of people's lives because he helps tap into, again, something that we give away, our power. We give away this like ability to arrest in a moment this self-pity, the pity party. And he says, you always have the authority to feel the emotion and no one's telling you not to feel the emotion. But if it's a negative emotion, you just got to get over it and give it like 90 seconds is what he says. And maybe it's 90 minutes, but you feel it, like feel it. I will, like my wife has been present for like Nico laying in the floor crying, like a 5-year-old saying, why is this so goddamn hard?
Uh-huh.
And then you get up and you brush the dirt off. He has a really good, I'll see if we can link to it, a really good meditation. It's not even meditation. It's just like he calls it the priming exercise. You can look it up. I'll link to it, but it's Tony Robbins priming exercise. It's 15 minutes on YouTube and it's well worth it. When I'm really stuck, Lisa Ann, I go watch Tony Robbins priming exercise and I just fucking move through it. I have in the last year wanted to quit. I'm sure you and I've talked about it, but I've obviously not proclaimed that on the podcast. And people have kind of come to my rescue and said, nah, you can't quit now, dude. You're a decade in, 800 episodes.
Yeah.
Like you got something to work for. And people are expecting that you're going to show up. And And people have come out of the woodwork to say, how can I help? And I think that going back to your other question, like, if there's advice I would give Nico, episode 1, it is you do not have to do this alone.
Mm-hmm.
And ask for help before you need it. And figure out how to delegate. Man, delegation's so damn hard. And that's something I'm teeing you up for your next question, I bet. But that's something that I've learned through so many conversations with entrepreneurs, is that there are some universal truths.
Delegation is some of the hardest because you have to invest in it. You have to slow down and think, okay, how can I embody what I need to have done, but have it executed by someone else? Doesn't exactly have to be the way I would do it, as long as the outcome is similar, right? That's something I had to struggle with a lot, being a perfectionist. I wanted everybody to do it exactly the way I would do it. And I had to learn to be okay with 90% or 80% perfection if
Yeah,
somebody else did it.
I don't know where I read it, but they said if you can get it 80% good, that's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And oh man, as a recovering perfectionist, I can tell you, you nailed it right there. Letting go of it needing to be done my way, man. I don't know that I've even gotten there until like maybe this past year. It's the hardest thing for me as an entrepreneur. We're building a marketing agency behind the company or behind the podcast, and we got a podcast network that is fledgling. We have an events business, and that's how a lot of people sort of see us show up. And my job is to both find the revenue opportunities and still continue to find interesting people and get them to be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Delegating the rest is hard, and I've been trying to do it since the very beginning. And it's not for lack of trying; it just takes a lot of practice. For some people, it seems to come so easily. It does not for me.
I mean, for those that it comes easily, they may be delegating, but without any instruction.
Yeah.
So the key is to be able to set somebody up for success with a certain framework.
Yeah.
And then you can rinse and repeat that delegation. But if you're just like, hey, handle this, then they come back to you with all kinds of questions, or they do it not the way you expected, and then they got to do it over. And so I think a lot of people struggle with delegation because they don't want to slow down and invest a little bit more of their time to figure out, okay, how do I hand this off to somebody in a way that sets them up for success? Sometimes when you're running around and you need to delegate something, you don't even feel like you have the time to slow down to do it right.
Completely. Another sport that folks who certainly, if they listened early on, know, because I talked about it ad nauseum, and I went running a lot. It was running. I ran a lot before I got diagnosed with Crohn's, and there's a book and a lot of research around this theme called "Run Slow to Run Fast." Furman University has an entire lab dedicated to optimization of running, and these two scientists from Furman University wrote a book called Run Slow to Run Fast. And I think about that in terms of business building, in particular around delegation and SOPs. And most founders I see who are succeeding that I interview, they've not only surrounded themselves with capable, smart people, usually smarter than them, but they've slowed down long enough to make sure that everybody understands the game plan, and that anything they've handed off is really well scoped. And that's the running slow part. And like they say, if you want to run fast, run alone. If you want to run far, run with others.
And the key too is you can't really delegate something unless you know how to do the job first. You have to fully understand how to do that job, and then you can delegate it to somebody else. And that allows you to be able to oversee it. I can't tell you how many CEOs I've worked with who came from big corporations who just always had professionals around them to do whatever. And they could just say, hey, just go handle this, and it would get handled. So then in a startup situation, they were just lost at sea because They had no capacity to give instruction or set expectations or anything.
Totally.
Um, and people struggled. And it all comes from the top, obviously. So showing up as a leader is a lot of different things. And as a leader, you get a chance to know what those all are for yourself and work
Yeah.
on all of them. Being a leader is so much of professional development. And that's what I really love about our friendship is that you and I are similar in that space. We are hardcore on the professional development. Like if you met Lisa Ann 25 years ago, you would not recognize her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a totally different
Yeah.
person, I'm sure. And I've watched
Dude.
you evolve just in the time that we've known each other
Yeah.
because we're two earthlings that are really dedicated to showing up as our better selves every day.
Every day. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. There's this other aspect that we haven't even talked about, which is when you have product that's better, cleaner, faster, cheaper,
Mm.
it sells, right?
Yeah.
So you don't actually have to spend a lot of money on marketing and promoting yourself in a way, which is kind of a counterintuitive comment
Mhm.
to my other comment about how everything's a meritocracy and people think things should sell themselves.
That's
In
right.
certain aspects, they do. Like, look at the battery industry. When we started working with Simplify years ago, they couldn't keep product on the shelf.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of battery manufacturers,
Mhm.
and they had a backlog. So the motivation to be like, why are we spending money on marketing when we've
Yeah.
already sold all of our product for the year wasn't there. The
Totally.
business case wasn't there, right?
Dude,
Look at
look at
heat pumps. I can't
well,
even
look at
get a heat pump company to come on the show and talk about heat pumps because they're too busy selling heat
completely.
pumps.
Do you know how many guests from First Solar I've ever had on the show? 0. Do you know how
0.
far out First Solar is perpetually sold out? 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
They are right now selling 2027.
Good on
Right?
them. Good
First
on
Solar
them.
never goes on a freaking podcast. They don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good point. But we do have an industry where people could be spending more on marketing. And the question is what kind of marketing would be beneficial? Like where are the holes? Where are the gaps that people could be shoring up? I mentioned to you in private that we find that even when we create amazing content for people, they don't really know what to do with it. And we have worked with really great companies and smart marketers that do know what to do with it. But by and large, like, I don't think and this isn't a personal attack on anybody that's worked with us. Please don't take it that way. I think that people are overwhelmed. And you said, you rightly pointed out that often folks are good consumers of marketing, but don't necessarily understand outside of like the obvious sort of events and trade show marketing and website marketing, how marketing is going to help them move the needle on the thing that their superiors care about, which is sales, right? Because marketing is sales. And so it gets sort of distilled down to, can you help me generate leads?
Google says I can pay $1 a
That's right.
click and I've got a lead. So
That's right.
what are you going to do for me? And you and I are in the business of I can bring a horse to water, but I can't make it drink.
Yeah.
I can tell it how great the water is, how clean it is. I can put it right in front of it,
I did,
but it
dude,
has to be a
Lisa,
choice.
you'll love this, and I won't call the company out, but we did a paid campaign that for a dear friend who I love, and they have a product that just about sells itself. And he calls me and he says, "Dude, I got X $1,000. Can we run a campaign?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it. I'd love to test something." And we put the whole thing together, and I said, the thing that I can't control is your landing page. And we put the campaign out. It was great. We got like over 30,000 impressions on the post on LinkedIn. Crickets, not a single click on the landing page. Right? And we can show traffic went to the landing page. And I said, we got to fix the landing page, which actually we had given a lot of feedback on, but no work had been done. And it's like, what we have to, as an industry, like really understand the importance of there's brand recognition, which is what people mostly get from working with a podcast channel, right? It's like the ability to explain yourself is one thing, but the ability to have someone like like me, who's been in the industry for almost 20 years and who has a lot of respect in the industry and a deep canon of work, have you on the show as a sponsor, not a guest, as a sponsor, is me endorsing your product. I have said no to companies that want to work with us as a sponsor because I don't think that they have a great product or that their product is the best for our audience or that they are committed to something that I'm looking for, like domestic manufacturing, for example, which I think is in the best interests of our listeners. And that's what our listeners are going to be looking for. So the importance of that brand recognition and that endorsement is an aspect of marketing that people under appreciate and under spend on. They will spend on ads to try to drive like display ads, either through Google or through industry trade magazines, to try and get people to click on an ad, like a banner ads, 2008 style.
Yeah.
Hoping that someone will, as a result, because, they've been promised X thousands of visitors to the website, will click through. They'll land on a landing page that probably hasn't been optimized. And this isn't across the board, but this is stuff that I've seen. It's not universal. There's really smart marketers in our industry. I'm not dissing on marketers in our industry, but it's the whole thing. Like, if you're going to actually send people to a landing page, I'll tell you who does this really well. I'll give a shout out to Sean Swintek and the Omnidian team. Like, they do this really, really, really well. I know because I've interviewed several folks on their team, either while they were on the team or after they'd left, that talk about the long process of A/B/C testing, from everything from color to placement of buttons to the specific length and verbiage of titles to like 3, 4, 5 different images for the same post. And when we get that curious about what's going to catch attention, then we start to see results. But people will stop after like one post and say it's not working, or they'll, Lisa Ann, true story. And like, we had a sponsor, and we tell our sponsors, we are ad supported. I say it every time. They pay the bills. They keep the lights on. All I ask you to pay attention. I tell our advertisers, you could send me a new ad every week if you want to. Guess on average how many ads we get from a sponsor over the course of a year.
One.
On average, we get 6 ads over the course of a year.
Okay. 6
from
ads.
a sponsor. Yeah. So you can do the math. That's one every couple of months. And so that's one test per 8 weeks. One message test every 8 weeks. I say that we need to stay in their ear for 12 weeks to get like that consistency. So it's not like I want to shift the message every week, but we could test a new theme every month. I know what I'm publishing for the next such and such weeks. Anyway, I think it's really interesting the way that we spend gobsmack amounts of money to get our team and our brand in front of people at a trade show where we're not guaranteed any leads or traffic, and we're not guaranteed any attention.
But it's also maybe not about that. At a trade show, maybe you got big deals you're trying to close, big customers you're trying to land, and you have to show the whole industry that you've got enough money to set up a booth at a trade show.
That's a really interesting counterpoint.
And then next year, you're going to spend more. Maybe not because you have it, but you have to give the impression that the company is growing.
Okay. Yet, and
then you become in phase, and you're like, we're not doing this anymore.
But for years, in phase was like, they just didn't even do it. Like, they didn't even send people.
Yep. Because they didn't have to at that point, because they had built the brand out so much. Yeah.
Like, I know, Next Track, like, I think Next Tracker wasn't at Intersolar. They'll certainly be at ACP. Like, I think about some of the big brands versus the fighter brands. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely different strategies for where you are positioned. And I guess that's one of the things that we should do a whole episode on positioning. I think we could do a whole episode on positioning, because that's one of the areas where people get it so wrong. they think their product is so obviously awesome that they don't have to figure out their positioning.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
know. I know one CEO that told me, we're just going to keep doing cool shit and people are going to notice it. Why do I need to hire you? And
Hmm.
he did, and we got them a tremendous amount of coverage and exposure for what they were doing. But that attitude he had carried through the entire company, and that company is not around anymore.
Oh, wow. Mm.
$150 million to nothing because he
My,
had that attitude and that poor delegator attitude. Like, well, just do it.
yeah,
Just fix it. I'm not going to give you any instruction. Oh, you did it completely wrong. So now I have to take control over everything. And now I'm going
right.
to bottleneck the whole thing. And we were just the
Hmm.
PR team.
Yep.
I can't
That's
even
not like,
imagine
that's
how
not,
he had bottlenecked the entire rest of the company with
right.
his how he acted.
You didn't do how I wanted you to, but you didn't tell me how you wanted it
Mhm.
done. Okay. I digress. Oh, man.
But
Oh,
I
Lisa
think
Ann.
I think there's a lot of misunderstandings around positioning, marketing, how it works, this industry. And then somebody's got a KPI. Somebody's job is going to be judged by how many clicks something got
Yeah.
or how many banner ads they put out. And so then it's just a race to the bottom in terms of that aspect versus thinking more holistically and perhaps out of the box, right? Do you got to do your block and tackling. You got to have your LinkedIn ads. You got to boost certain things. You got to have your Google, your SEO. You got to have a good website. That's all just table stakes. And then
Yeah.
everybody's got to think about how do I tell my story in the most unique way and maybe an out of the box way that's going to bring me attention because it's so different.
Yeah.
Because we as human beings, our whole brain apparatus is designed to be a pattern recognition machine so that when we see something that is different, boom, we notice it,
Yeah.
we remember it
That's right.
because it could kill us. And that is psychological marketing. Like you
Yeah.
have to, and that's what you're talking about, the landing page and the colors and the words. That's all psychological marketing. And when you do that right, you sell off the shelf, but nobody wants to put
Yeah.
forth the effort because they're like, my landing page doesn't have to be optimized. My technology is amazing. I mean, people are
Yeah.
just going to buy it once
Yeah.
they see it,
I
right?
used to want my website to look like the websites that I admired. And then I realized from a psychological marketing perspective that I don't get the associative benefit. If somebody looks at, like Antenna Group was one, I like really thought their website looked nice. And it was like the likelihood that anybody will think that we copied Antennas is really low, but like they're really smart. So I'll like copy their layout and their design. And then I started looking around and I was like, wait, other people have already kind of copied this layout and design. And now people are going to look at my website and their eyes are going to glaze over and they're not going to have any, like nothing's going to
Yeah.
catch their attention.
So you've done 800 episodes, right? So you're a master interviewer now. I
Thank
mean,
you.
you gotta be. I know you are.
I feel like
Um,
I've gotten better.
but when you're sitting down preparing for an interview,
Mm.
what's what's your ultimate goal? Like obviously you want to get the information out and you want to, tell them the story and let the company or the interviewee share their message. That's all
Yeah.
fine, but like beyond that, what is that thing that is that you're that is the DNA of what makes a Suncast interview
Yeah.
a Suncast interview?
You know who I think you should ask that question is Karam, because Karam I feel like has really thought about that a lot. He routinely, and I'm in some ways going to parrot him. Karam Baran is is a business partner, and he has a sister website called solaracademy.com. And the way he approaches the interview is very different from mine. And he says to me, in the spirit of edification, you're the best interviewer in the industry, and here's why. And what he says is, he says that a Suncast interview gets people to share things they've never said before and gets them to be vulnerable in ways that they never thought were possible in the public forum. And you know, it's actually very intentional. I uh I if you've spent time with me off camera, I'll usually, like, I don't like to beat around the bushes. I'll go deep with people really quickly. And throughout the 800 episodes of SunCast, the two things I'm most proud of, and I try to solve for in an episode. I used to like obsess over this in the first like 300 or 400 episodes. That's why it's kind of sad to me that people don't go back and listen to the early episodes, because even though like the quality is improved and even my interviewing style is improved, the raw energy of those early episodes is so good, because I really was solving for, can I get someone to say the magic words? I've never told anyone this before. That's magic. And I would listen to someone's interview on other podcasts and like strike questions out if they got asked before. Because my assumption is people are going to listen to them on other shows. I want my interview to be unique. I want it to be a precious gem. I want them to walk away and go, wow, I never had that kind of an experience. Whoa. And so this first is they'll say, I've never shared this before. And the second is I want them so comfortable that they're willing to cry with me on air. And I've had that happen numerous times. I've had also, guests say, hey, please don't share the part where we cried. But I want you as a guest to let your guard down. I want to know selfishly, what's the scariest moment? Like, I don't ask these questions anymore now because it gets people so on their heels. But like, I want to know, what's the scariest moment? Like you asked me, when was the moment that you just thought you were going to throw the towel in, and how'd you get through it? What is a regret? What career did you not? I've had people get really sentimental. Like, what career path did you not go down but always thought you would? I stopped asking that question a long time ago because I just came up with a different set of questions. But man, that's a good opener. What career? Like, that's a great networking question, just to get people to answer something that they're not expecting. What career path did you not go down that you thought you would? I want people to just let their guard down. I want them to let that veneer break. And that is the thing that people routinely come back and say, this episode is required listening for anybody that interviews at our company. There's dozens of companies who use the SunCast interview of their CEO as required listening before an interview. That's the greatest. I mean, like, that alone, if I just had that testimonial,
a testament. Yeah.
It's a testament to the 800 episodes. But the ability to get people to let their guard down is, it's a treasure, and it really, it is the part that is so meaningful. When I can see someone, I can see that emotion crack. I know that like they have now I've achieved trust. And if I've achieved trust and established trust and rapport, we can talk about anything. And you'll tell me if you don't want it published, but we'll talk about it. And I've had, like 60, 70, 80-minute interviews that were published from 2.5, 3 hour conversations, like the one that you and I are having today.
Yeah. It's a testament to also your understanding of what true storytelling is. Because it's not just this happened and this happened and this happened. It's a story arc. There's an emotional arc. And we are tribal people. Even though we live in a very sophisticated civilization, our brains are still very tribal. Yeah. And it was the best storytellers of the tribe that became the leaders of the tribe.
Yeah.
And that mechanism within our brain, if you can tell a good story, that's how we remember information.
Yeah.
And the emotionality added onto it embeds the information into our minds. Deep memory. And so you're natural at creating those experiences for people. So it's no wonder you have such a loyal community of listeners after 800 episodes.
Yeah, thank you. Well, here's to another 800 and even better storytelling as a result. I really believe that the thing that's missing from our industry becoming a natural, ubiquitous part of the fabric of society is good storytellers in the captain's chair. And at the helm of marketing who really help empower those leaders to get these stories that here's what happens. You see, they're there. I just interviewed Adib Nasli at Zindi. Guy is a natural storyteller. When you listen to the interview, you just know it. You're like, man, here's a guy who has really learned to embody the progression of his career as a narrative for why this product exists and how like the crew that made it are the reason that something like this could come about right now. And we allow that tribal knowledge to only be shared in coffee or dinner conversations or sales calls. My vision, and I share this with Karam, is that all those things that we share as a way to try to convince people, compel them, inspire them to work with us, that we divulge, even as trade secrets, if you will, on sales calls. That's where the gold is. Like that tribal knowledge, that's the intellectual property that unlocks the hearts and minds of people saying, I want to work with you. My good friend Jim Wood has diehard customers who will buy from Seg Solar. If he picks up the phone and says, like, we need you, they will buy from him at a premium because he is willing to share that commitment with them. And I say to him and others, share with the world what you share on your sales calls. Share with the world what you share around the dinner table at a customer dinner. Right? That's the real meat and potatoes of what this company's about. And if you can capture that, then the rest of your team, from your salespeople and marketing to operations, get to benefit from it without you as the bottleneck.
Mm-hmm.
We have these methods and means now that we can capture this content and break it into micro content, redistribute it all around the world, and share that message more broadly. Yeah. And if people would let their guard down and stop being afraid of what other people will think, which has been the venom in my veins for most of my adult life. If you really spent a lot of time around me, you know that I'm like, the thing that I most fear is other people's opinions of me. When we let that guard down and we just share from our truth about what we believe the world needs, gosh, why are you working for this company if you don't believe the world needs it? Just for a paycheck? Come on.
Well said. Well said.
I'm curious what else is on your curiosity list.
I also had a question related to, thinking about the future, because I come from a futurology standpoint with my thoughts. It's easy to say, oh, who do you want to interview? Who'd be great? Blah, blah, blah. But my question is more like, in the next, let's say, 2 years, let's not go too far out. Let's say in the next 2 to 5 years, who are some types of people that you expect to start showing up in this industry to lead it in a different way?
Wow, that is something, that's an angle to that question that I've not thought through. And it's a really intriguing way to put it. I thought you were going to say, who will I have had on before episode 1000? Or, we had this episode with Alex Honnold that did millions of views, blew away everything we've ever done before. And I said, that's too bad that it's hard to get lightning to strike twice. It wasn't because necessarily I did such a great job interviewing Alex, which I think I did a pretty decent job of, but because he has millions of followers in a completely tangential
the network effect
segment. Yeah. Gosh, I hope that because our industry needs a facelift, in the sense of people believing that we're not selling hopium and the counter narrative to what's going on with the current administration. God forbid we continue to have people believe that the EPA should be gutted the way it is, or believe that the IRA in some way is detrimental to the forward progress of our country. I hope that people like Alex Honnold and others in markets where they are famous will shout from the rooftops the way he is doing This just makes sense, people. How can you believe otherwise?
Mm-hmm.
So we need strong advocates in the public eye. Like imagine if Kanye West was like, I want to start a solar company, right? Like, ye solar, right? Dude, solar would be the most popular, seriously, or if there was like if like at every Grateful Dead revival concert or every, God, I could name 36 bands. If the music industry embraced solar, because it could power all of their concerts, and in fact does power so many of them, right? If it became, I think it should become commonplace that directors in movies should have pano shots that show solar, right? And dams and wind turbines
and electric vehicles and people charging. Like, it has to become ubiquitous in terms of our cultural narrative.
That's
not in your face, because then it feels like it's too preachy, and people will reject it. It has to be very quietly in the background. The car somebody's driving is electric versus gas, and they stop at a charging station to have a scene that is totally unrelated to charging.
Totally. Dude, like, when are we going to get product placement for solar in a major movie, right? Paid for, right? Like, somebody's holding a Coca-Cola in a freaking movie. It's because Coke paid for it.
A lot of money. A lot of money.
Right? Like, why isn't Sunrun paying for a Sunrun truck sitting out in front of a house, and while the realtor comes over to the next door neighbor? Like, that could easily be written in the script. Tor Valenza is working on his probably true solar stories and trying to figure out how to turn that into, these are the kinds of things that we have to turn into public media that people, that to your point, become ubiquitous, where it's no longer we're trying to sell it. It is accepted as the state of being. And it's not it's obviously not going to get solved by politicians who believe in it. We got plenty of politicians who believe in it. 21 Republicans came, very publicly said through Politico, this is not okay. Not on my watch, not in my backyard, because renewables are doing a good job of saving jobs and providing stable baseline power to our baseload power to our communities and keeping the lights on. So yeah, I just think that we get whipsawed by things that we see on social media. And so maybe the kinds of personalities we need in this industry, it's got to be more how do we make this whole thing more entertaining? That's what I'm trying to figure that out. We run an entertainment company, for better or worse, my job is to hold your attention for 70 minutes. And my job is to get you to come drink a Bloody Mary with us at what is an otherwise, to the rest of the world, completely boring activity. My kids don't understand at all why I spend so much time at these things called trade shows. They can't fathom how it's interesting.
Yeah.
They're and the same people go to another city and they put up the same, that backdrop thingy, and they just they don't even hold their product up. They don't even have any of their products there. They just want to have conversations about their products. And it's confusing to people who aren't a part of this world, how this whole industry works, right? And part of my job is to try and help make it more entertaining and fun. Part of your job is to help make it more interesting and enlightening.
I 100% agree. I think part of the challenge our industry has had, generally speaking, not everybody, but generally, we borrowed a lot of our messaging from the environmental and conservation movements,
right?
Which was, this is the right thing to do, and you're going to have to give something up for something else to have a better experience. And in the clean tech space, quite frequently the attitude is, well, we're just a better technology. Obviously, we're cheaper, better, faster. And from
Right.
a bit and obviously this is a meritocracy. So
Right.
obviously everybody should know how great it is. I shouldn't have to tell you, and I shouldn't have to go through the effort of promoting myself to tell everybody how great this is, because it should win on merit.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's not how the world works.
Yeah. What are the analogs for that? Like, as you're saying that, I'm thinking obviously the age-old Betamax versus VHS thing,
Yeah.
right? Like Betamax was better technology, VHS won because they had better marketing.
They actually won because they had a better customer experience.
Customer
So
experience.
Betamax was 30-minute tapes. VHS was hour-long tapes.
Aha. So you
And
needed
so
two
people didn't wanna
Betamax
have
to
to
get
get
through.
up and change put in the new beta at the 30-minute mark. They didn't wanna
That's
have to
really
get up
interesting.
and do something.
That makes
Same
sense.
reason why, tape decks took over records, because
Right.
people didn't wanna, you know, they wanted a longer form on one side. So the
Man,
customer experience
I
was
didn't
better.
know that.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. We need our friend Andrea Lukey here.
You learn something new every day.
Yes, you do, Andrea.
That's pretty good. Yeah, and from a customer experience, this industry, especially specifically solar, hasn't had always the best reputation, and that's something I think we're continuing to recover from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but looking forward, how do you bring the right people with influence and power, and people who are willing to utilize that influence and power to take this industry from where it is to that ubiquitous mainstream? And I think
Mm-hmm.
those are the types of leaders we're looking for, and we know that they're out there,
Yeah.
but they haven't tapped in, or we haven't tapped into them. Something's missing, and we're going to figure it out, and it's
Yeah.
probably has a lot to do with money.
I'll
And
tell
this
you, man,
industry
like,
largely doesn't spend enough money on lobbying and
that's right.
advertising.
That's right. And also, like, it's there aren't that many pieces of the industry, in phase aside, that have just gobsmacked margins. It's a low margin industry still, for the most part. Like the finance side of the industry, yeah, but it's single digits to build this stuff in terms of the profit margin that's available to the contractors. So they're not going out and spending a ton of money on advertising. The module companies as well, like low to mid teens profit margin digits. The finance companies have, probably closer to 50+% margins, and some of the OEMs have some pretty healthy margins. Those companies should all be investing in organizations like SIA, but we don't have a really a consistent approach to having a PAC from a political perspective. I wonder if instead of having a PAC, we had like a Hollywood version of that, right? Where like there was $1 billion in a pool from the industry that said like, we want, we don't want just a handful of actors who believe in this. We want like the up and coming actors, the 20 somethings. We want them on screen with Matthew McConaughey, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Texas, walking through a solar field, right? Because it's a part of a movie. And to your point, again, like I'm coming back to it's just got to become ubiquitous. I don't even remember the original question, but
I think that's what makes a good interview, Nico. That question ignites a conversation.
There you go.
I think, but it was sort of like, who are the leaders that we expect that we need in this industry in the next 5 years? The characteristics, and I think we've touched on a lot of that. People with network effects and influence.
Yeah, and that's in the zeitgeist. But I'll bring it down also to like, we have a real, and this is where like maybe Dan French is over there pulling his hair out until like, what are you talking about, Nico? There are real answers to this question. We have a real battleground on the ground at municipalities around the country. Virginia, I bring up Dan because he's, they do the Virginia Solar Summit, and they are seeing battles every day. If you aren't reading The Fight by J.L. Holtzman at Heat Map News, you're missing out on some great reporting about the fact that we are losing the on the ground battle in the in the heartland, all across the East Coast, where dissenters are winning in the town halls and in the commissioners meetings, where they're voting to approve or deny permits. And the leadership that we need are council people and commissioners with spines who believe in renewables, who will stand up to the hack jobs that are coming in, well funded, to shoot down. Let me give you a great example. There's a solar project, 25 megawatts. Okay, 25 megawatts is going to take up about like let's just call it. Let's see, it'd be half of that. So 25, it'd be like 125 acres, something like that, of trackers, right? Was shot down in Virginia in the same commissioners meeting that a 2,500 acre server farm data center project was approved, right? Oh, by the way, do you know the data? I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. How much water a data center needs?
A lot.
How much water does a solar farm need? 0. How much contribution to the local economy does the data center providing jobs? Next to nothing, right? Like it's absurd. But the economic value, in terms of the revenues that'll flow through, I presume. I don't know how they make money off of a data center. I presume that the revenues flowing through a data center are pretty high if AI is taken off the way it is. And anyway, I think it's a tragedy that a 25 megawatt farm gets shut down when a project that is literally, 10x the land use gets approved, and also probably 10 or more x the resource use. And so we're losing the battle on the front lines in the narrative around what gets approved and what gets denied to get built, and that's where we need leadership.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to money and influence. Honestly, if people who are elected at the local level have backers that stand for certain values, right? They know that they'll have to answer to that backer if they're not supporting those types of values, right? In general. And there's a lot of money to counter what this industry stands for and the influence and effects that it is having. And that the more money that gets spent to counter an activity that you're doing actually means that you're winning. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
What did Mahatma Gandhi say? First they ignore you, then they make fun of you, then they fight you, then you win.
Then you win. Yeah.
Okay. So the more resistance we're getting as an industry actually means we're making a difference.
Yeah.
And we're making a dent, and they're running scared. The problem is...
Yeah, we're past the make fun of you stage. That's for sure.
Definitely past the make fun of you stage. But the problem is, generally speaking in society, folks that agree that something is good or agree with the status quo, they tend to be the quiet majority. And so that voice isn't being heard at your local council meetings, right? It's the vocal minority, and the minority always has more of a motivation to be vocal and be active because they're trying to counter something.
Yeah.
There's less motivation on the majority side. And how do we create that voice and demonstrate to our local leaders that the majority of people do support this and we have your back to stand up to the dissenters? I think that's key in the next 5 years. This whole industry, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little preachy now, but
I love it.
This whole industry has figured out the technology. It works. It's better, faster, cheaper. To continue to quote my my client over at Align Climate Capital, Brendan Bell, and the markets are bought in, and it works. And this is the way forward. The next stage for this industry is to communicate that in ways that people feel confident enough to act the way to use their influence and power to continue to proliferate the good things that are going on in this industry. That's the next stage in my mind.
Well said.
So people need to get off their asses personally
That's
and
right.
use your influence for good.
That's what we keep trying to do with Earthlings and SunCast. Use our influence for good, get the right people in the room, help them have conversations that move this industry forward. And ultimately, as we say at SunCast, we amplify clean energy voices. Our job is to help folks find that authentic voice, communicate it to the world, and rally folks around their cause.
And you're an excellent example of that. You exemplify that day in and day out.
Thank you.
So congratulations on your 800th episode.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to share the mic and the stage with you. Thanks for turning the mic on me today.
Well, you're welcome. My pleasure.